Welcome, Team Encore. We've got an exciting guest on our podcast today. For all the golf ball aficionados, we're gonna have some serious discussions here with a famous golf ball engineer, Mike Jordan. All the ins and outs of golf ball design, how to select the best ball for your game. And Mike is a guy that usually hangs out behind the scenes designing and engineering golf balls. So today we got him in front of the camera. His name and intelligence has been behind 40 patents in golf ball designs. We're excited to announce he's going to be full-time on Encore, but Mike has really had his hands in pretty much every golf ball Encore has designed, from the Avant, the Elixir, the X1, the Vero X1, and the X2. And in a past life, he's been with some pretty big notable golf companies like Titleist and TaylorMade. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Really thrilled to be here, be part of Team Encore, and get to meet some Encore aficionados.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. Just, over the years, getting to know you and just the way you talk about golf ball, selection, design, and have been helpful answering all of our questions. I think our listeners will be excited to tap into some of that knowledge, and certainly want to encourage them to leave questions, and we can certainly answer those. But Mike, first one, why don't you let listeners know a little bit about your background, your studies at Furman, and I know you went on to run the show in for a number of balls for Titleist and TaylorMade. And so just kind of give us the quick elevator pitch.
Yeah, I'll spend more time on the golf stuff that's more interesting. I have a degree in chemistry. I did a bunch of undergraduate research when I was at Furman University, hands-on chemical development, synthesis, and a whole bunch of stuff that really didn't have much applicability in the real world, but it taught me how to problem solve. It taught me how to kind of create unique solutions to some vexing problems. So after I graduated from Furman, I went to work in textiles and chemistry, dyeing polyester, which is dreadfully boring, nobody cares about. But importantly, that led me into Titleist. So I went to work for Titleist after a few years in the textile world, where I started off at Ball Plant 2, which was their two-piece plant for many, many years. They made some three-piece balls, but for most people, they were the thermoplastic products, the Pinnacle lines, a lot of the NXTs, and some of the other products there. And then from in the Ball Plant 2 world, I was in the quality engineer, and I learned every process in the plant, how to make everything, how to run everything, how to do everything, which is invaluable moving forward, because you truly understand, what it takes to make a good golf ball and to make millions a day. I was fortunate to move from the Ball Plant 2 into Titleist R&D. Spent several years there, and eventually when I left, I was leading all the thermoplastic golf ball development, as well as most of the material evaluations for Titleist. And really fortunate, got to design and implement the NXT balls, which at that time in the 2000s was the most successful launch ever. DT Solo, I did the Pinnacles multiple times. I did a lot of work on dual core formulations, which became the V1X. At the time, it was Pro V1 Star for some wonks out there. Probably the best ball I've ever developed that never got sold was called the M1 Distance, which was a Titleist. It was a three-piece ball, cast urethane, designed for average swing speed golfers. We decided not to launch it because it was just too good. We didn't want to cannibalize sales of the Pro V1. So that's a great one. I still have a couple of them laying around. If anybody has questions about that, put in that in chat, and I'd be happy to tell you about it. So spent a good bit of time at Titleist, and then transitioned to TaylorMade. And at TaylorMade, I led the engineering efforts, as TaylorMade was wholly owned by Adidas. They took over MaxFly's production and patent portfolios, and needed to get into the production game. So I took over that. We put TaylorMade into the urethane golf ball business, and then continued to help them in the development with their initial TP launch, a bunch of MaxFlys, the Pentas. Yeah, and then outside of that, I transitioned away from TaylorMade. Started going to some different business pursuits, but as Steve's mentioned, I've done a lot of consulting for a lot of people we've heard of, a lot of places you've never heard of. But I've had my hands in golf balls and golf since 1999, and then love it, enjoy it.
So, how does a football guy at Furman get into golf ball engineering, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I played football for him, and I forgot to mention that before. And I just lucky. I guess the only way I could put it was that I had a chemistry degree, I had experience in manufacturing and problem solving, and then got into golf. And sport is sport, and the competition and hard work and again solving problems is a skill that fits most any industry.
In terms of the creativity, the engineering, creating something from nothing, right? Which your patents, by their nature, they're unique. They're new to the market. How does that process work for you? Did you always know you were kind of an inventor at heart?
I didn't. It's something it really kind of comes down to, in the simplest terms, solving problems. Designing golf balls is balancing multiple different inputs. That there's three things that make a good golf ball that translate to overall distance and control. So you need your ball speed, which is inherent to the golf ball, as well as the swing speed. You need launch angle, and you need backspin. And you've got to be able to control those three things, and to be able to make the best overall performing golf ball. Well, things that make the ball go faster also make it spin more. Those two are bad. You don't want more spin off the tee. You want more spin off the wedge. So it's a balancing act. So there's a whole series of problems that you're always trying to solve. One of the patents that I'm most proud of was using a non-neutralized, essentially the base polymer for ionomer, which is the inner casing for most of the golf balls that are out there, or inner cover for most of the golf balls that are out there, as a moisture vapor barrier layer for urethane construction, very thin. Urethanes, cast urethanes, thermoplastic urethanes are very soft. They're very cut and shear resistant, but they absorb water. Absorption of water is a very bad thing for golf balls. They get heavy and they get slow, and you need a layer underneath that to prevent that water from getting into the core itself. Well, we always wanted to make a two-piece urethane golf ball, but you can't because it'll get you too slow. So one of the patents I did is I concentrically molded a thermoplastic moisture vapor barrier layer in 3/1000ths of an inch, which is about a human hair. So that was a process it was solving a problem that was preventing us from creating a solution that golfers could take advantage of. And that's kind of how most of the patents came around. Hey, I wonder if we could solve this problem by doing it in a novel and unique way.
Do you think the constraints inherent in a golf ball, whether it's imposed by the USGA or just the ones you've laid out with ball speed and spin, make it easier or harder to innovate in?
What the USGA is limiting, and what they're doing is they're kind of bounding physics for us from a lot of the flight aspects of it, right? There's only so far with the limit on the initial velocity and limits on the diameter that we can do and the weight. It makes it a little bit level for everyone to be able to create a very good golf ball at a set parameters, but it's guardrails. If they weren't limiting us from that standpoint, we could definitely make some changes, and we could definitely improve some things for a lot of golfers. Now, that said, we're also getting pretty close to some of the limits of the materials themselves. We don't have the full capability to really drive what a golf ball could be solely based on what the materials can do today. And some of the things that we'll talk about here in a little bit is where I see some of the future and where things are going, and some tricks that we can play to try and get more out of the materials that we do have access to. But it's an interesting question. It's something that we always are pushing on to see what we can solve.
Yeah, no, and that certainly is going to dovetail into some future questions about distance, and how you design for that, and how the USGA comes into play. So you mentioned Titleist, in your background, and in the golf space, we often hear people say, well, that person's not good enough to play a Pro V, or in our case, it would be, our person's not good enough for the Vero X1 or the X2. I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but when you kind of hear that statement thrown around, like how do you interpret that as someone who's, helped build these golf balls?
Yeah, I think To me, that always kind of comes down into an economic decision, right? If you look at the Pro V1, people talk about how great a performance it is, and it's a great product. But it usually comes with that premium price tag. And for me, if you can afford it, right, and you can get the benefits out of it, go for it, right? Now, what that performance does is if you can't control it, it can get you in trouble. I liken it to cars. I like cars, right? So if you think about this, you think that if you can afford the best performing, most luxurious car out there, why not? Now, if you go out and buy an Audi RS8 and you're not a very good driver, you're going to get in trouble, right? So those are some of the things that kind of I equate that to. It's and a lot of the golf ball choices that when I talk to people on how do I choose a golf ball, I use the car analogy as well, right? So if you care about performance, if you care about having complete and total control, you typically would go to what some of the better brands are, right? The Audis, the Mercedes, the BMWs. All of those are going to get you from point A to B, just like a Kia would or a Yugo back in the day. But they're going to do it in a different manner, and it's going to give you different things that you can both manipulate and enjoy in the process of doing that. Now, I'm a BMW guy. I like BMWs. I like that because I like that combination of driving performance with a little bit of comfort, and I can get a little bit crazy with it. My wife is an Audi person. She likes Audis. It's tough to get a little crazy with an Audi based on the safety features of some of the things. And so those are the things that appeal to different people and go into the choices that you make. And the golf balls are just the same. As you're choosing your golf ball, as you're going to fit your golf ball, you can choose that Pro V1. Now, if you have your swing isn't that repeatable and you've got some pretty high spin rates coming off the tee, you're going to lose a lot of them. But that's okay. That's your choice, right? There's probably a golf ball that's a little bit better suited for you that could pull some of that spin down for you off the tee. Because likely if you don't have a repeatable swing off the tee, you're probably not that repeatable from 150 yards in either, which means the benefits that the Pro V1 is going to afford you, you're not going to use. Same thing with a high-end performance sports car or luxury car. If you don't care about going to 0 to 60 in a short time frame and want to do it in comfort, there's no reason to spend your dollars on that.
Right. And just so our listeners are clear, we're not suggesting they support our competitors, but certainly wanted to address say the elephant in the room. You do hear that question a lot, and just to that point with our offering, the X1, the X2, and it truly being compared to some of the best golf balls out there.
Mm-hmm.
How should a listener think about OnCore, whether it's within the D2C world or against some of the big OEMs we've touched on?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things I mentioned the economic aspect. You're not going to find a better performing golf ball in the market, period. And then once you layer in there the D2C aspects of it and what the value that the OnCore golf balls are delivering, I'm confident saying you're not going to find a better value anywhere. It's incredible with the performance that you will get from an OnCore golf ball. Now, just looking at the golf balls from the OnCore, the designs, what we've done versus the competition. It stacks up with every golf ball, every big brand that you can think of, period, from tee to green. That each golf ball is designed to provide a specific playing condition, playing parameter that maximizes it for targeted swing speeds. And it's as intentional and as good as anything that anybody could be purchasing from any other brand. And this isn't hyperbole. This isn't me guessing. This is me knowing based on experience of doing that exact same thing in some of the bigger brands. Not knocking the bigger brands. That's one thing I want to be very clear is that the TaylorMades, the Titleist, the Callaways, they all make great products, but we do too. And I think one of the things that I think there's a little bit of a misconception that because you're not this big brand, you can't have this ability. Well, we've got the technology. The materials are available to everyone. We make use of them, and we also do it in a different manner on Encore, where we start working on perimeter weighting. We move the moment of inertia higher. We move the weight to the outside, which reduces spin off the tee, but decreases the spin decay at the end of it. So we do a unique way of solving problems that a lot of the competition, even the big brands, don't do. But you can, with confidence, you can invest in an Encore product and know that you're going to get outstanding performance.
I love that. And for our listeners, that struggle with ball selection. There's so much information out there, maybe a lot of confusion about what ball might be best for them. When we're out on a course doing a demo, we tend to ask, well, what's your swing speed? What's your handicap? And, we try to diagnose people, but from an engineering standpoint, how do you help someone when they ask you, hey, Mike, what's the best ball for me?
Yeah, and I do it a little bit differently, and hopefully this doesn't isn't too annoying or unsettling for people. But I start with your short game. Most people blow up their rounds from 150 to 100 yards in. Jacking a putt that far is the same as you hit a 300-yard drive. It counts the same on your scorecard, and we forget that. Now, distance is important and control is important, and it's absolutely a valuable part and an important part of your decision-making matrix. But where I tell people to start is take the ball, get it around the green, and start hitting the ball that does what you want to do around the green. So what do you want to do around the green is what I ask people. What do you like to do? Do you want to throw it at the pin and have it stick? Do you want to be able to hit a low runner and have it roll out? Do you want it to check? Do you want to bring it back? The great thing for us here at OnCore is that we have products that do all of those. Right now, we believe more in today's game that people are going to be throwing the ball at the pin and having it stick more. That's why we have a higher launch. And so with our Vero X1 and X2, you're going to get that performance. Our Elixir does as well, not quite as much as the Vero. So if you want a little bit more of a rollout standpoint, I would point you more towards the Elixir. But if you really want to pinch the ball, if you really want to bring the ball back, all of them will do that as well. But you're not going to have too much spin. For our old timers like Baladas, where you could pull the ball off the green, we're nowhere near that standpoint, but you can't get the control. So I start with the green and end, right? So what do you want to do?
Right.
How do you want to shoot? How do you want to score? Then I start working backwards from there and say, what type of feel do you like off the tee, right? The good thing that you don't have to worry about Encore, all of our balls are long. You're not making a sacrifice choice of like, well, this ball's 5, 8, 10 yards shorter than someone else from the other ball in Encore, and you're not sacrificing any distance when compared to any other brand out there. Every one of our products, we test them, we know we're the great distance we're at, and oftentimes longer than most other people. So then it comes down to what do you like? How do you want to feel? Want a little bit firmer feel? Do you like a little bit softer feel? If you want a little firmer feel, the X2 is for you. If you like a little bit softer, I would point you towards the X1. And then if you like that softer and you want a little bit lower trajectory around the greens, then you're an Elixir player. So that's how I work people. I work backwards from the greens to the tee and fitting it from there.
So I went through a lot of our testimonials. They published to our product pages. And I was looking at the X2, seeing what our customers were saying. Feel seemed to come up, just as much as distance, and just wondering how, from an engineering standpoint, you design for feel, and maybe we can jump into compression and some of the, misconceptions around, low compression, mid, high compression, what that means. But yeah, feel I've always thought, is it's individual, it's subjective, but how does one go about designing for a great feel?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's certainly one that has a lot of confusion. It starts with the core. The core, or the innermost layer of the golf ball, is going to determine most of what the feel is going to be. And then it transitions from there to the material choices that you have for your inner cover, depending if it's a 3-piece, 4-piece, 5-piece, how many different inner layers there are into that outer cover. So you start with having a combination of a ball that's going to provide the spin profile you need, which is going to be dictated by your core size, the compression of the core, the firmness of the core, and then the materials thicknesses that you move from out there. So a very large, soft core is going to feel very soft, right? That also means you have a very thin inner cover and a very thin outer cover. That inner cover is a thermoplastic, which is a plastic product, for lack of a better word, and it can be clicky, right? So there's two things that people get when they hit the ball off the tee. It's that initial overall feel of the compression as they hit that ball and it compresses, which is tied mainly to the core, and then it's the sound that they hear. And there's been a lot of research and work done on this, that I can have two balls and have completely different, like 10, 15 point different compressions. One sounds clickier than the other, and every golfer thinks that the clickier golf ball is harder than the one that is not clicky when the actual compression is different. So the feel is a very subjective, as you said, interpretive thing. And a lot of people interpret the sound with the actual compression of it, which is not the case. All right. So that's another reason that how the method that we designed for that. By having a relatively large core with a relatively lower compression, we're managing spin that way. We have a thin inner cover of that harder, clickier material, which limits that click. So it's a material choice and a construction choice. That's how you design for that feel. And that's with all of the Encore balls, we're very intentional in that. They feel fantastic. For the old golfers, and I'm dating myself here, they feel more like a wound ball than a solid ball, with an amazing overall control of that multi-layer piece golf ball.
Yeah, I was surprised by the number of people that mentioned feel being, and it was a positive, so I was curious how you could design for that. And I always would have thought it would have been through the hands, right? The hands obviously grip the club, and whether it's that vibration or the impact coming up through your hands. But as you mentioned, it's a lot more sound based than it is through the hands.
Yeah, and that's firsthand research of doing that work and putting it in front of golfers and getting that feedback, and knowing what the actual physical measurements of how difficult it is to deform this golf ball, right? That would tell you the feel, and it's wild when that happens. I think another thing is if you get it right, which I think we really have, especially on the X2, it's firm. And when you hit it pure, it just feels amazing for baseball players out there. It's like when you crunch it right on the sweet spot, and you don't even feel it. It just is that satisfying overall. Yeah, I got all that one. It's a great construction for that feeling.
And another thing golfers mention is the speed, it flies off the face. And I'm sure, the scientist in you is maybe a little skeptical because of how fast the balls truly are coming off the face. Can I really tell you that this ball flew off faster than, and it's whether it's intuition or whether it's, just a gut feeling. But certainly our golfers, our customers are really enthused about the speed it's coming off the face. And, maybe you could just speak to that element, because it seems to be pretty important to golfers. Does it feel heavy? Does it feel fast, light, that sort of thing?
And that's again that's a outgrowth of the actual construction itself. So that's how we deploy the multiple different layers, right? So we have the core, we've got the inner cover, we've got our nano layer, and then we've got our urethane cover. If you have a really thick, soft cover, it's going to feel heavy. It's going to feel mushy when you hit it off of the tee, as well as when you start getting around the green. That really thick, and most of the high-end golf balls that we're talking about, our Bureaus and our Elixirs, have thin covers in the 35,000s range. Well, what we have done is we've made that even thinner. So we're in the 25,000s range of that outer cover. So it makes it feel responsive is the word I would use, from tee to green as you're starting to hit it, right? So even as you're coming in at the steeper angles to hit that cover, you're getting the grip that you're needing, but it's not so thick that you're really impinging, and it's really sitting on that club face. So it's very intentional design of what we do from the construction and the thicknesses of each of the layers that we designed and deployed for these products.
Love it. Let's just jump to compression. I know, years ago you had the Duo Soft and these super low compression balls that came onto the scene, and really, really changed what golfer, the vernacular that golfers thought about golf balls. Then you had, folks like My Golf Spy come out and say, well, soft equals slow. And, we need to be careful about these low compression balls. I've heard Titleist forever never really talked about compression, because the review was that whether it was a high compression ball or a low compression, and whether you were a fast swing, elite golfer or just an amateur, you all really compress the ball at a similar, if you used a high speed camera and you looked at that ball compress, it didn't really change much between the high swing speed guy and the low swing speed guy. So there's just so much, information out there. Can you maybe settle the score and just give us golfers some insight into how to think about compression?
I think we're going to have to whet our listeners' appetites, and then maybe have a podcast dedicated explicitly for this with a series of questions. But I will jump into it, and it's probably going to be one of those things where people are like, what in the world is he saying? Compression is important because it dictates speed and spin. Okay.
Okay.
So the speed and the spin. Now, what we talked about the three things that are critical for golf ball performance: ball speed, backspin, and launch angle. Right.
Right.
So two of the three most important things are directly tied to compression. Now, how you in the old days, when we first started doing polybutadiene cores, you got faster speeds by being higher compression. So when we talk about resilience, right, that the measure that you do for resilience is you drop a body into a fixed surface, and the amount that it comes back up is how resilient it is, right? So if it was perfectly resilient, it would bounce as high as you would drop it. That would have a coefficient of resilience of 1, right? That'd be ideal. In the golf ball world, for years and years, the highest CORs, or coefficient restitutions, that we could get was about 0.78 for a core, right? So 78% return on the energy that you put into the golf ball. Think about it that way. And that was the speed that you could get. And the only way you could get higher is to make a higher cross length, a more dense golf ball. And that was how you did it. With some core chemistry that came along, a lot of research and development by a lot of different places, we were able to change that. We got some better rubbers, we got some different core chemistry. You could get 0.8 COR coefficients of restitution at a fraction of the compressions that you used to be able to do to get that 0.78. So the higher the compression, the more spin you get, right? Spin's bad. So the lower the compression, the less spin you get. Lower spin translates to more distance. It also translates to more control, fewer slices and hooks, right? So this was a great tool for golf ball designers. Like, I can design a golf ball with lower spin all the way through the shot range by having a lower compression, and I'm no longer sacrificing speed, that coefficient of restitution, because I have better core chemistry. Okay. So remember the Bridgestone Lady, remember the Noodle, remember DT Solo, all these other golf balls that came out, and our own Avant takes advantage of this as well. That's a two-piece ball with a very soft core, with a Surlyn cover that's meant for, beginning golfers, folks that have a little bit of uncontrolled excess spin. That lower compression is far more forgiving. Okay. With me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm following.
Okay, so this is where it starts to make sense. So people start going about, what compression do you want to play? You're going to be careful. Now, lower compression means lower spin, which is a good thing. But you also, even though with this core chemistry, I have a lower compression, if I increase my compression through my higher cross-linking, my core chemistry, that's a 50 compression core with the same port with the chemistry in it, and an 80 compression core. The 80 compression core is going to be faster. All right. So compression still translates into an overall increase. It's just not as dramatic as it used to be. So again, you think about this as you firing a sphere, right? If I'm really soft, I'm going to spend a lot of time compressing. If I'm firmer, I spend less time compressing and more time being resilient. Okay. So as that compression will give you higher speed. Now, we also mentioned the USGA is limiting our initial velocity and some of the other things. So we're limited of how fast we could be. Now, that said, the higher that I hit a body, right? And we talked about, even with the slow speed cameras, the golf balls only compresses a certain amount. This is where people are probably going to get a little confused. Everyone benefits from a higher compression golf ball, period. Okay. Everyone will benefit from getting more speed and potentially more distance from a higher compression golf ball. The harder you swing, the more benefit you will get. Okay. The harder you swing, the more benefit you will get. That intuitively makes sense, right? I have this thing. If I hit it at a very high rate, it's going to deform more than if I hit it at a very soft rate. So what the balance point that you have to strike is that, as I said, the higher the compression, the more spin, right? Spin means more shorter distance and more opportunities for slices and hooks and things that you don't want to have happen. So it's a balancing act, right? So while everyone will benefit from a higher compression golf ball, right? Everyone gets that benefit of more distance potential. They have to balance that with the spin. So this is that game that we need to do. So when you go back to compression, what should I play? How do I make this decision? Most of the balls that you're going to, all the balls you're going to have in the OnCore product line, you're in good shape, because there's other ways that we can control spin, right? So we talked about this before, our perimeter weighting, our moment of inertia. That's what we do to help you maintain and control your spin, so you don't have to worry so much. You pick the ball that feels good to you to hit. For other golf balls, if you're not, for some unknown reason, you're not using an OnCore golf ball, and you're trying to decide what compression for you, you need to go back to feel, and you need to go to what's gonna feel good to you. If you're a big hitter, if you have a high swing speed, I would point you to a little bit higher compression golf ball. You're going to get more benefit from distance if you're chasing distance. If you're a big swinger, big hitter, and you're having a hard time controlling your shots off the tee, I would tell you to go to a lower compression so you have a better chance of controlling that spin. So it's a balancing act. If you're not that repeatable, if you have some problems with some slices and hooks, I would tell you to get a little compression. If you're very repeatable and you were chasing a little bit of distance, I would tell you to play a little bit higher compression.
I like that. And that, I think, intuitively makes a little bit of sense to me, in the sense that, yeah, there's trade-offs, and you always hear about the high swing speed guys. Yeah, they should be playing the higher compression, but you also added that caveat that everyone does benefit from the higher compression. So that would include a lot of, slower swing speed
Absolutely.
players, and maybe that's, but I think the way you said it was great, and I'm gonna mess it up if I try to
well, another analogy for the golfers
summarize
is blades, right? For my irons, I always wanted to hit blades, right? The blades are the best. You can work the ball, you can do those amazing things. Well, guess what? I'm not good enough to hit blades, right? Because it's really hard. It's designed for the best golfers that have a repeatable, controllable swing. And when you hit it well and you're good enough, that sweet spot, there's nothing like it. But I had a set of blades, and 1 out of 30 shots was amazing. The other 29 were god awful. That's why I went to cavity backs. It's the same type of a thing, right?
Right.
If everyone could get a benefit from the blade, but if your swing's not repeatable enough where you can hit that ball the same way, you're not going to see the benefit. And compression is that way, right? The lower compression is how golf ball designers keep you safer from your spin profile.
Let's jump into distance real quick. I know you mentioned the constraints the USGA places on us. Initial velocity, and I know they have a test for total distance in the air at a certain swing speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So without kind of giving away our trade secrets and that, how does a company like Encore continue to push the envelope of distance, and do it where each generation does really get better and longer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, in full disclosure, we do improve and we do get longer, but we're not talking 10, 15, 20 yards longer, right? Because that would imply that we're a good bit shorter than what the standard is. We know what the standard is, and we go right up against it, just like a lot of the other competition is trying to do as well. So that starts with our core chemistry. It starts with our constructions and the materials that we choose so that we can design what we're going to be making from a chemistry standpoint to give us the highest possible initial velocity that we can get without being illegal. So that's the first thing. So we do that from our core chemistry. We do that from our material selections, from our inner cover, our nano layer, and our overall outside cover. It's one overall symbiotic relationship construction that we do that's intended to be right at the very top of the limit. We test that. We test it frequently. Our manufacturing processes are such that it's repeatable, so that we can live up against that edge. We are a great brand, and we're growing in our volume, but our batch sizes are also such that we are very confident in being aggressive in the levels that we build our core chemistry to, so that we don't have outliers, so we don't have issues, so we don't get run afoul of our friends at the USGA with having some manufacturing issues, which some of our some of the larger, bigger brands, they're making literally millions of golf balls weekly. And that's the reality of what happens in a very large manufacturing process. So that's thing one that we do, is that we're intentional about our designs to be at the very limit, and we monitor them, and we control them tightly. The other thing that we do is that we look at different ways of controlling spin, because spin is another chance, is a major driver of what we're going to do from our overall distance. We talked about this a lot. Encore was founded, you and Brett started the company on perimeter weighted golf balls, right? Hollow metal sphere as the inside. The whole point of that is to move the weight to the outside. If I have a body and all the weight is on the outside, it takes more energy for me to start moving that. That's called a higher moment of inertia, right? Now, once I do get that body in motion, now that I'm moving, it takes more energy to stop that body from moving. That's called spin decay, right? So I have a higher spin decay that I'm controlling at the end. So what that translates is I have less overall spin going into a golf ball than one without the perimeter weighting. So if I take the exact same design and I have the one without perimeter weighting and one without perimeter weighting, the one with perimeter weighting is going to have lower spin. It's also off the tee and off the iron shot. It's going to have more spin at the top or the apogee of the flight because it has the spin decay is retarded so that it's not going to be falling out of the sky. So that's a very unique way that Encore does. No one else is doing that today. No one else is moving that moment of inertia up. No one's moving that weight out. That's one of our major differentiators.
And on that note, just a plug coming up, we've got a variety pack. So listeners that are interested, pretty soon we will have a sleeve of each of the models. So we'll have the Avant in there, the Elixir, the Vero X1 and the Vero X2. So you can buy a variety pack dozen, our performance pack, and then you can try each ball out and do a ball fitting as Mike has suggested, start from the greens and work your way back. We also have an online ball fitting quick questionnaire and an offer at the end for you to try a dozen. So just wanted to throw that out there. But I guess last question, I know we're bumping up into time here, Mike. Future technologies golfers should be on the lookout for in golf balls and where the industry is moving. And then we'll wrap things up here.
Certainly. So the industry is always trying to push the envelope around materials. What can materials do that's going to translate to improve performance for golfers? I mean, golf's a hard game, right? You got to figure out every advantage that you can to make it where you can control what you want the golf ball to do while living inside the USGA's realms. We'll continue to always chase distance. We'll always work for that. We'll always look for materials with higher coefficients of resilience because that just gives us more options from both constructions, from the sizes that we do, the layers that we do, and the thicknesses, and et cetera. But I think, and you see this in some of the competitors today, some of the things that they're leaning into is that having materials that perform differently, behave differently at different rates of attack from a club, or also from different kind of impingement points, right? A driver's more of a flat, an iron's more of at an angle. Right. So as you start looking at where I get hardness, where I get softness, where that gets deployed, if I have a cover material, a non-Newtonian material, like a non-Newtonian liquid, you can stir it with your finger, but if you hit it, it gets rigid. As we start to look at materials like this, these are the things that we're going to start to look to deploy, right? If I have a very material that's movable at an iron strike, but it behaves very firm and strong on a driver strike, that would give me very differentiated performance. We're also looking at what the world of nanotech does and how that can help us with different layers, different loadings. Can we get different performance based on different rates and different strikes? So the future is bright. You're going to always continue to look to improve your game, and you've got a great partner in Encore because we're always looking to make golf more fun, more enjoyable, and using science and technology to help deliver that for you.
This has been great, Mike. We're so blessed and lucky to have you on the team, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge with the Encore fans and listeners. Listeners, please do leave questions below. If you're listening and in your car and you want to email us later, any questions, I'll make sure Mike gets them. You can do info@encoregolf.com. And we'll make sure we get your questions answered by the expert here. Mike, thanks for joining us. Look forward to having you on again in the future, and thank you for all your knowledge today.
That's great. I love talking about this stuff. It can go on forever. So yeah, we'll definitely, let's make this a habit and do it on some frequency because it's fun. Hopefully we can get some questions in and we can answer specific questions. So please, I love helping people with their golf ball questions. So if you're curious, send it in.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.